Welcome to the Retirement Made Easy podcast. I'm your host, Greg Gonzalez. My goal for the podcast is to help you live a better life in retirement by giving you the tools and information you need in a language that you can understand. If you're a new listener to our podcast, like I said, my name's Greg Gonzalez. I started this podcast in the summer of COVID, summer of 2020, and I wanted a way to reach not only the clients that we work with. I'm a retirement planner in St. Louis, Missouri, with clients across the country, but most of them are local in St. Louis and Illinois. So the podcast not only reaches our clients, but also listeners who are trying to learn more about retirement so they can set themselves up for a bright future. On the last episode of the Retirement Made Easy podcast, we talked about ways to optimize Social Security and the thought process behind claiming that lifetime annuity called Social Security, your Social Security retirement benefit. That's one huge component of retirement planning, but it's just one component. So episode by episode, I plan to teach you the different components that go into a successful retirement plan. And on today's episode, we're going to talk about returns. What kind of rates of return do you need from your portfolio for your retirement to be a success? And what do I mean by that? Well, just think about it. If you went into retirement, and we always call retirement a 30-year journey. Why do I call it a 30-year journey? Well, the average age of the American retiree is 62. That's the most popular age somebody retires in this country. It's 62. And if you look at a couple, a non-smoking 62-year-old couple, their joint life expectancy, how long the actuaries tell us that one of them is going to be living, is 30 years, or another way of saying that is until age 92. So typically, women outlive the men. So what we're saying here is we need to plan for a 30-year retirement from 62 until 92. So on today's episode, we're going to talk about the portfolio, the nest egg, the retirement nest egg that you bring into retirement. It may involve like your 401k, your Roth IRAs. Maybe it's a brokerage account with mutual funds. Maybe it's IRAs or 403bs. Those are your retirement accounts, the money that's earmarked to get you from 62 until 92, the golden year, so to speak. And those retirement savings accounts, those retirement investment accounts, whatever you want to call them, the purpose of them is to fund the next 30 years of your life. So on today's episode, we're going to be talking about, in my opinion, the most crucial element of retirement planning, and that is figuring out what is the minimum rate of return, average rate of return that you need from your retirement accounts, your retirement nest egg, to get you from 62 until 92, to make sure that there's enough money at the end of the day so you don't find yourself in your late 80s, early 90s and saying, gosh, I spent through my retirement accounts. All I have at this point is Social Security. So we're going to talk about what minimum rate of return that you need to make your retirement successful. So before we get to today's episode, I wanted to remind listeners to check out our website, retirementmadeeasypodcast.com. There's a lot of resources available for free on the website. My retirement secret sauce, our tax planning guides. So certainly check those out. And then for those listeners who are, maybe they're just maybe on the doorstep of retirement, maybe it's even a couple years out, and they don't know if really they're on track or when they're going to be able to retire. We offer what's called a complimentary retirement assessment just to listeners of the Retirement Made Easy podcast. This isn't for everybody. We offer 2 of these per month, and we're booking for the month of March right now. So you can go to our website, retirementmadeeasypodcast.com. You can click on the free assessment, and you can book your step 1 phone meeting to get started. And it walks you through the steps. It's a very simple process where we can report back to you with your assessment, your retirement assessment, where we can point out any gaps that you have in your retirement plan and offer recommendations to fill those gaps, and also give you an idea, are you on track or not? Or should you be doing some things between now and your retirement date to improve your odds of success? So if you're interested in that, again, it's our retirement assessment. You can find it on our website, retirementmadeeasypodcast.com. We love doing these assessments for people. It's a way of kind of meeting some of our listeners and offering some personalized guidance. All right, let's jump into today's episode. And this episode, again, I wanted to talk about figuring out what is the rate of return that you're going to need from your retirement accounts, your retirement nest egg, to be able to retire comfortably and remain comfortably retired for the next 30 years. Again, the goal of retirement is to stay retired. We don't ever want to have to go back to work when we're 85 years old. So when I'm talking about the average rate of return, imagine you're driving from New York to LA. We're trying to figure out what is the average speed you're going to need over your journey to get there on time. So imagine we did a summary, an assessment, and we said, okay, if we're leaving New York, we're going to LA, you need to average 75 miles per hour throughout your entire journey to Los Angeles. Is that even doable? I would rather we have a requirement of, let's say, a 40 mile an hour average speed from New York to LA. That gives you time to be able to pull over, maybe stop for lunch, use the restroom, do a little sightseeing, things like that. But if we do the same assessment and we say, okay, you need a average speed cruise of 75 miles an hour, I don't think that's achievable at all. And so if that was the case, I would tell somebody, hey, you might leave a day ahead of time or maybe 12 hours ahead of time so you can enjoy your journey and you don't have to drive so fast. So let's put some structure around this conversation. So your retirement plan might look like this. It might say, okay, for your retirement plan to be successful from 62 until 92, you only need an average rate of return of 3% per year or 4% per year, or maybe it's 5% per year. Are those numbers achievable? Well, it's going to depend on how you invest your portfolio. On the flip side of this conversation, let's say you did this assessment and it was determined that you need an average annual return over the next 30 years of 9% per year for your retirement plan to be successful. I can tell you, based on my opinion, I would say hold off on retiring right now. You need to keep working and save more for retirement. Because if your plan calls for a 9% average annual return for it to be successful, you're better off pushing off your retirement. And when you do an assessment like this, there's always a tipping point. And what I mean by that is it may look really, really good at 5% or 6%, and it looks horrible at 3 or 4% average return. And obviously 6% or higher, it looks terrific. So there's always a tipping point, and finding that minimum average rate of return that you need for your plan to be successful is absolutely crucial. It tells you everything you need to know. It tells you the minimum rate of return, kind of your goal that, okay, if I can just get 6% per year return for the next 30 years, I'm golden based on this plan. But if I get less than 6% average rate of return from my retirement accounts, my nest egg, the results are going to be grim. So it's always best to get this analysis done ahead of time before you retire to know, hey, what's it going to take? What is the minimum average rate of return that I need to make this a happy ending to this retirement story? Again, retirement, you're writing the last 3 or 4 chapters of your life. And if you only knew ahead of time before retirement what rate of return you would need to avoid running out of money at some point in the future, what a blessing that would be. And if you only knew that before you retired, wouldn't that be one of the most important bits of information you could ever discover? So I really encourage all of our listeners, figure out, what is my tipping point? What is the minimum rate of return that I need from my investments, from my retirement accounts to make my retirement a success? Let me give you an example. So let's say you figured this out and it said, okay, you need a 3.5% rate of return, average annual rate of return for the next 30 years of your retirement for your plan to be a success. Let's say if we did the same analysis and at a 3% rate of return, you ran out of money on your 85th birthday. You're completely out of money and living totally on Social Security. But if you got an average rate of return of 0.5% higher, 3.5%, that you would be so much better off. And at your life expectancy, there would still be $1 million left in your portfolio. Well, wouldn't that strenuously suggest to you that, hey, I need to be investing with a goal of a 3.5% rate of return every year? That's my goal, is 3.5%. So if you knew CDs were paying 1 to 1.5%, you wouldn't even consider CDs to be a part of your portfolio to begin with. Or money markets. Let's say money markets right now are paying 0.25 to 0.5% annual interest. Well, if you need 3.5%, you wouldn't even consider those to be a part of your portfolio because they're not helping you achieve that 3.5% return that you need. This crucial analysis, this bit of information, what is the minimum rate of return you need to make your retirement a success? If you only knew that ahead of time, it would tell you how, at a minimum, you should be investing your retirement savings. Now, I think it's fairly obvious, but if you have overfunded your retirement, the minimum rate of return that you're going to need is going to be much, much less than someone who has appropriately funded or underfunded your retirement. If you have an underfunded retirement and you're on the doorstep for the next 30 years, you're going to need an excessive rate of return on your retirement accounts to make your plan a success. And for those people, they may, like I said, consider pushing off their retirement or modifying the retirement lifestyle that they're considering. But yeah, you might find somebody, and I have met quite a few people that have just been retirement savers their entire life. They have always saved between 15 and 30% every year for retirement, and come to find out their retirement nest egg is overfunded, meaning they could have retired maybe a couple years ago, maybe 5 or 10 years ago, but maybe they enjoyed working and they continue to do so and save for retirement. So if you're in that situation and you have overfunded your retirement, well, you might only need a 1 or 2% or 3% return for your 30-year retirement to be a success. And what does that mean? Well, what that means is after being able to afford the retirement lifestyle that you desire over the next 30 years, and you've paid for all those expenses and all those dreams, and at the end of 30 years, when you're 92 years old, you still have a lot of money left over in your retirement nest egg. You've won. There's still a big cushion at the end that would either go to children or other loved ones, charity, something like that, some cause that you care about. I have a client that is actually a pilot, and he had this nice analogy, and he said, so it sounds like what you're saying is I need to figure out how much gas I need to have in my tank for me to arrive at my destination with still enough fuel that doesn't make me worried about running out at any time in the journey. So if F is your full, E is empty, that you still get to your destination and you still have a third of a tank of fuel that's left over. I thought about that for a minute and I said, wow, that's really a nice analogy. Again, that was a client of mine who's a pilot, and that was his way of thinking about his retirement resources, his assets that he brought into retirement. For him, it was his 401k and Roth IRAs for him and his wife. But he kept saying over and over in the meeting, I don't want to be in retirement and run out of money, or be in mid-flight and run out of fuel. And like I said earlier in the podcast, the whole idea of retirement is being able to retire comfortably and remain comfortably retired for the next 30 years or however long you live. So my best advice from this episode is figure out what is that minimum rate of return that you need. Not it would be nice to have, not the minimum rate of return that you absolutely need from your retirement savings, the 401ks, Roth IRAs, IRAs. What is the minimum rate of return that you need for the next 30 years to be able to have a successful retirement without ever running out of money? I promise you, if you can figure out that crucial bit of information, what is the minimum rate of return that you're going to need to make your retirement a success, that alone will make your retirement outcome practically guaranteed. I hope this episode of the Retirement Made Easy podcast has been helpful. If you have questions, visit my website, retirementmadeeasypodcast.com. At the bottom, it'll say Ask Greg a Question. Submit your questions to the podcast. We may use your question on a future episode. And remember, always dream big. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, please consult your attorney, tax advisor, or financial advisor prior to investing. This is a hypothetical example and is not representative of any specific investment. Your results may vary. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices mentioned are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. The SmartVestor program is a directory of investment professionals. Neither Dave Ramsey nor SmartVestor are affiliates of St. Louis Retirement Advisors or LPL Financial. There is no guarantee that a diversified portfolio will enhance overall returns or outperform a non-diversified portfolio. Diversification does not protect against market risk. All investing involves risk, including loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA, SIPC.